What's going on, everyone? My name is Mark Reel Jr., the Father's Rights Attorney and host of the Father's Rights Playbook podcast. And tonight we have an extra special episode. This episode is going to be one of the panels from our book launch event earlier this month. This panel is on false allegations, and you're going to hear from media personality Chris Cole and Real Father's Rights senior trial attorney Ryan Dreyer. I hope you guys enjoy. Now on to the podcast.
Ryan, there you are. You're unmuted now, sir. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great today. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Ryan, we've never been on a podcast or a show before, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself. I'm also a podcast host, so I'm going to kind of treat you as the guest, and you and me will kind of just divulge into conversation between the two of us, and hopefully Melissa will be able to join us soon.
Outstanding. That sounds great. So my name is Ryan Dreyer. I've been a family law attorney for 11 years. I previously focused my practice in Orange County for a Patterson law firm. I've been over with Mark for about a year now as a senior trial attorney. Prior to coming over with Mark, I've done over 100 domestic violence trials, and I've done probably about another 100 in the last year, just representing fathers in the day-to-day. So we see a lot of use of the domestic violence laws to gain an unfair advantage in child custody and visitation cases. It also is used in some instances to prevent a male or a father from receiving spousal support, because there's a presumption against receiving spousal support to someone that has committed domestic violence. So it has broad-reaching implications when you look at is there a motive to bring up false allegations? And there absolutely is, especially when you look at the fact that domestic violence laws or domestic violence restraining orders are granted on a preponderance of evidence standard rather than a clear and convincing evidence standard. So it's very easy to get a restraining order, and I think shockingly easy to get a restraining order if you're a man. I think it works both ways, but the majority of domestic violence cases are brought against men, right? So we have to be very careful in how we combat domestic violence cases, and then further into the child custody cases, because people love to basically try to throw the dad under the bus for sometimes very innocent behaviors that are conflated or are blown out of proportion. And so part of what we're doing when we are putting on our case is we're defending their allegations and providing the complete history to the judge, right? The judge is the trier of fact. I practice in California. And so I've practiced in pretty much every family law courtroom in Southern California, all 5 Southern counties. Some judges are very tight with domestic violence orders, and some pass them out for text messages, right? So that's the kind of general overview, but my practice is generally related to trial advocacy of finding the truth behind matters. And so part of also what I'd like to do today is put the information out to men of, hey, there's certain behaviors that you think are innocuous, but end up having you lose custody, right? And we could probably talk about that more later.
Yeah, one of the notes that I took, because I had a few questions as the moderator, I wanted to be prepared and discuss with you and Melissa, who's unfortunately not here at the moment. Hopefully she can join us, being that you guys are both attorneys. I'm not an attorney. My expertise for the family court is more of a victim and a father, as well as my kids being victims to things like false allegations. I have a good set of my own that I may mention in a few minutes. But like you had said, what are the typical tactics on using false allegations to sort of muddy the water in the litigation process?
Well, A lot of the times you'll have a he said, she said, and a domestic violence restraining order can be granted on a he said, she said basis. If the judge just happens to find the other party a little bit more credible than you, that's all it is, right? We have different standards in law. We have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's our criminal standard. That's our highest standard, right? But we also have a clear and convincing evidence standard, which is used in California for elder abuse cases, for civil harassment, restraining order cases. Unfortunately, in California, we have a preponderance of evidence standard in determining what is domestic violence, right? So, one of the big instances that we see is that they will build a pattern of cases going back years and years and years, right? And a lot of times, my clients won't even remember this alleged incident that occurred because it didn't occur, or it was a small incident that was basically making a mountain out of a molehill, right? And so that's where we have to find completeness of a record, right? So, as a father, you have to expect that anything that, especially if you're in a difficult relationship, anything that you can and do say over social media, over text messages, over emails will be used against you. So those angry comments where you've just had enough, and maybe the children are being kept away from you, maybe you haven't seen the children and you've seen them every day of your life, that guys lash out sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And they make comments that they don't really mean and have no history of violence, right? So I think what shocks a lot of guys is the fact that they can have a completely clean criminal record, that they can be great providers, that they can be a stand-up father and have been there for their children every day, and somehow a small incident takes away their right to custody for 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, right? And I think it blows people away. There is a circumstance I see a lot, which is where they pay for the dad pays, or the father or the parent pays for a cell phone, and they get into an argument and they take that cell phone away. What a lot of people don't realize is when you take that cell phone, you're basically almost creating a false imprisonment standard. It is a separate crime and you can be convicted of it. And it also goes to basically a coercive control element. And a lot of men don't understand that. They think that it's an innocuous fit, but I've seen restraining orders granted on that. Another thing that I'd like to say about false allegations is, say you have false allegations and they're ridiculous and you're upset and your child is now taken away from you for 21 days, right? And then you get there and you answer ready, but the other side still gets continuance sometimes, right? And so now it pushes another 21 days. And I've watched my clients deteriorate physically and mentally, and they can't take it anymore. And so they lash out and they break that restraining order. And one of the biggest problems that I've seen is the fact that I've gone in and refuted every allegation that's been made against these clients, but they violated the restraining order, sometimes even innocuously by having a third party talk to them, or other instances where there's no real threat, but they can have a restraining order granted against them simply because they didn't follow the restraining order. And I think that blows a lot of dads away. It's like, wait, we just proved that all of these statements were lies, right? We brought in other people, shown them to be a liar, but there's a sustained allegation of them breaking the restraining order, and the restraining order is granted on them. And that's one of the saddest parts. Our law firm, what we like to do a lot of times, and I don't want to tip our hat too much, but I answer ready on the first time, right? We get, as a responding party, you get the ability for an automatic continuance. What I like to do is show up that first day ready to play. I bring my witnesses, I bring my evidence. I don't let them get entrenched in the lie. I don't let them get entrenched with their witnesses, right? Mm-hmm. And we go at it right away. And I think that's a great tool. Now, if you need more time, you need more time. But every delay, especially with fathers, means that they're out of their kid's life for another 21 days, right? Mm-hmm. And so to me, I don't think a lot of people really realize, yes, we've got to be safe, right? Yes, we want to provide everything, but they don't realize the impact, the mental and emotional toll that it has on these people, right? And sometimes the court's not available and it's continued another 21 days. And I've literally watched my clients deteriorate mentally and emotionally.
Well, the courts don't realize that getting it wrong is also abuse. It's abusive to the kids, it's abusive to the innocent person. So they, going back to your discussion about, we went sort of into legislation into this. Just for a second, let's talk about the preponderance and then clear and convincing. We don't have to get into the higher, which is beyond a reasonable doubt, but like you said, when you mess up, when you make the wrong decision, do the courts just think, well, he may have done something, he may not have, but it's best and they're safest if we just rule on this and we don't let them see their father. They don't see that as abuse of the children or the parent.
And that's true. I've spoken with Mark about this, and there's the whole issue of disturbing the peace of the other party, right? And that should be conduct that's so extreme and outrageous that no person should bear it. And and our thought has been recently, well, isn't it disturbing the peace of the other party to bring up false allegations and keep that child from them? Is not that domestic violence as well?
Right.
Is that not something that we need to deal with, right?
Right.
So it's very difficult because a preponderance of evidence standard, if in the hands of the wrong judge, if they find one sustained allegation, you might get a 3-year restraining order on that,
Right.
right? Even if you're not the principal aggressor, right? Even if you're, because a lot of guys aren't going to go out and file a restraining order when they could have, right?
Yeah.
And then when you bring it up that you were just responding to the behavior after the fact that they filed, it just looks retaliatory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is another issue which I really encourage men to get beyond, the whole, rule that I'm big, I'm strong, they're not a threat to me. No, they can be a threat to you. If they push you around, if they slap you, you need to bring your own restraining order and you need to bring it first. And that's where they get to the issue of race to the courthouse, right? Who gets there first? Because anything that's filed afterwards looks retaliatory, right?
Yeah.
But so a clear and convincing evidence standard is going to be a higher burden of proof. It's not just going to be a he said, she said, and the judge decides that on credibility, right?
Right.
You need to have extra evidence. You need to have corroborative evidence or demonstrative evidence or documentary evidence, such as text messages, emails, all of those type of things. And that's where you really have to be so careful on the preponderance of evidence standard. You have to address every allegation that's put in front of you. Also, you have to object to stuff that is not put in the initial pleadings or paperwork because you didn't have notice to that, right? Because really what's a key, if you have a third party witness, right? And it's a he said, she said, and I've got a third party witness that's actually seen something. That person's going to win every time with that third party witness, unless you can impeach their motive, their credibility, right? Their bias in that.
Correct.
And sometimes people just see things wrong as well. And you're pointing out that I had one a couple of months ago where she claimed that she saw him following her on the 405 freeway, going 70 miles an hour in a Charger, a black Charger, which is, a very common car, and that she knew it was him, but she couldn't see the license plate. She couldn't see anything else, right? But she testified on that. And so we had to go through, and I spent a lot of time grinding her down, making her showing, or at least intimating that what she saw couldn't have possibly happened, right?
Correct.
I've had another one where they claimed that my client, when he was standing outside at 5 a.m. getting ready for work, that the stepdaughter was flashing her breasts at him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we went through and took all the pictures showing that from where she said he was standing, he could not have possibly seen the daughter, and the daughter couldn't have seen him because the roof went up in a V shape that didn't allow him to see it, right? So that's where you've got to take it out of a he said, she said in a preponderance of evidence standard, right? And so a lot of times that's why I want to go forward first. But if you know that you have a weakness and you need to get the extra evidence, then you do have to continue the matter, right? Because
Right.
again, it is such a low burden and such a low standard of proof.
Exactly. And I mean, and that's the funny thing. We're talking about criminal allegations without criminal standard of evidence. So it's sort of counterintuitive that you would have such a low burden of proof for such a. I mean, domestic violence is a crime. You go to jail for it. It's a felony. Am I correct?
Correct. Well, it can be a wobbler, which means it can be either a misdemeanor or a felony.
Okay.
But if you put your hands on someone, it's most likely to be a felony abuse claim.
So let's talk about this. You have a allegation of domestic violence or threats being made. Your kids are kept from you. Keep in mind, like if you threaten the other parent, or in as a father, in my case, the mother of my children, but there's been no threat to the children. Why is it that they take the children when they should just put a restraining order on you against the mother or father in the incident, and never remove custody of the children when the children were never in danger?
And that is one of the ones where if you know you're going to lose the battle, you regarding the underlying allegation, that you really put it in as your role as a father, because sometimes judges will try to limit that, say, well, I just want to hear the domestic violence, but they're also going to make a ruling on custody as well. And so that's why I really will put out, are the kids there? Did the kids witness anything? Right?
Right.
Did they witness anything? Did they see something? Did the father communicate with them and bring them into the conflict?
Right.
Because I think it's very important that the presumption under Family Code 3044 is that there should not be shared joint legal and joint physical custody, right? And that's where really the attack comes, because
Right.
they take you out joint legal and joint physical, right? And then that really emboldens some people to say, well, then the father doesn't have any rights. Now, that's not true. Even without a joint legal custody, you have rights to the school information and all those other things, right?
Mhm.
But I think you do have to be very careful in describing what is their role as a parent, because judges a lot of times and the opposing counsel are going to try to limit it just to these 5 incidents. And what you need to do is expand it out. And judges don't like that, but you need to give context, right? We need to give the whole family dynamic. And so it is difficult. You do have to fight to establish that, right? At some points. Because there's one thing if the child comes in and testifies, an older child comes in and testifies. But for the most part, children want nothing to do with it. Most children just want to be with both their parents. They're part of both their parents. And when mom's saying dad's a monster and the child knows it's different, it brings some level of cognitive dissonance to this child,
Mhm.
right? They can't understand it. And it's even worse with young children, because now they feel like my dad doesn't care about me. My dad, even though dad might be fighting in court, might be putting down tens of thousands of dollars in their fight, right? What's the spin at home, right? And that's realistically, if the judge does make a ruling that limits to monitored, you need to do everything that you can, right? If they say that there's a damaged relationship, then you need a reunification counseling. You need to still be able to be at sporting events if you can. So
Right.
you can also, even if you're losing, you can modify the restraining order, right? So I think sometimes people give up too early on that, right? Maybe they made a mistake, right? And they
Mhm.
know they made a mistake.
Mhm.
There, then we want to try to whittle away and mitigate the damage that comes along with it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When we go back to that part where we'll kind of paint the picture here, we started with, all right, a false allegation can be delivered with preponderance of evidence. A judge will immediately probably put a restraining order on whoever, apparently, allegedly committed this offense. Usually, unfortunately, like we just said, they do it not only with the mother or father, but with the kids too, to protect everything. Time goes by. That restraining order lasts, I guess, in your state, it's 21 days. I don't know if that's universal. I think it's 30 days here. Um, And let's say 30 days pass, no incident, that restraining order is then dropped. You get to see your kids. Maybe you're awarded every other weekend for the moment, and then the judge will work out a exchange situation where everything's safe. In front of, let's say, a hospital with cameras. I'm just speaking a little bit from experience, which I think is ridiculous when there's no incidences of violence. But my question is, so once we go all this time and these allegations, no one's, let's be honest, Ryan, if I or you or any man or woman wants to hurt someone, we can make it happen. Most people don't sneak around and just show up in Dodge Chargers and drive by and go by the house. And, most of the time, anyone who's ready to commit violence can commit it, and there's nothing that anyone can do to stop it. So even with a restraining order, someone who's willing to commit violence is not going to be deterred by a judge's order, because usually violent people are not very stable. So let's say months go by, right? You have your kids every other weekend, and then 6 months, a year, right? You file to modify. You file, the original restraining order is gone, and you can't get your kids. By this time, shouldn't the court sort of look at the history of these allegations as frivolous and without any merit? Because at some point, whether it be me or anyone else, a mother or father, who's been convicted of these dangerous things that they may or may not do, couldn't we have already done them by now?
What's going on, guys? It is Mark Real Jr., the Father's Rights Attorney, and on August 7th, I am releasing my first book, The Father's Rights Playbook. My introduction to family law was my own family law case, and going through the family court system. And in doing that, my eyes were open to the injustices that occur and the trials and tribulations that fathers are put through. So it was a personal experience, and then my eyes were open to this broad systemic issue, which has inspired me to build this firm and now write this book.
Well, yes. The court, their first thing when they're granting a temporary, at least, is to make sure it's a safe situation, right?
Sure.
But I think one of the arguments, once, let's say a person has been granted the permanent restraining order against them, right? Once they've done the anger management classes, because generally they're going to come with a 52-week batterers intervention class, once they have dealt with their substance abuse, that's where we call in California, you've rebutted the Family Code 3044 presumption, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is very important, because in California, you're not going to get anywhere until you've rebutted that presumption, right? So you have to do the work, even if you feel that it was wrongful against you. You number one, need not break the restraining order. So you show the judge, look, I've played by the rules. And I'll tell my clients, like, look, you've got an uphill battle, but as long as you jump through the hoops, because they're going to put through the hoops, right? But what's most
Yep.
important? You can feel aggrieved, you can feel damaged, but that doesn't get you your children back. That doesn't get you back into your children's lives, right?
Right.
And so what I would like from them is to show, look, this is the relationship I had before the restraining order took the children away or limited my time. Look,
Mm-hmm.
and I will say, fathers that have been there in a positive role in their lives, they don't get screwed over as bad as other fathers. So that's not always true, right? Not always true.
Sure.
But generally speaking, you can show, look, I've always been in these children's lives, and me not being there is actually damaging to them. And so that's where sometimes you're also going to need expert opinion. You're going to need the children to see a therapist or a reunification for that person to say, look, the children are actually being damaged by father not being in the way, right? And we can look at the statistics, of children's success when they're raised without their father, right? They're all out there, and that's not my purview. I don't care about statistics. I care about each individual case that's in front of me and
Sure.
winning it for my client and getting them that result. And I don't even care how it's done, so long as it's done, right? I'm results oriented, right?
Sure.
So whatever gets us there. But I think, yes, it's difficult, and we can say that, hey, the system's stacked and it's unfair, and I can complain all day long. But that doesn't get me my kids back, right? That
Right.
doesn't get me every day in their life. And
Hmm.
so what I would say is, if someone who's stuck in this position where wrongful allegations have been upheld against them, that you need to take every bit of time that you have in this kid's life and maximize it. Don't be upset. Don't badmouth the mother. Don't do all those things. Because you know what? In the end, these kids are going to get older. And if mom's generally crazy or she's a habitual liar, these kids someday are going to see that, right?
Hmm.
And they're going to come back around. So all you can do is take care of your side of the street, right? All you can do is do right and be the best father that you can be, and be an advocate for these children at all times. And if that means you have to file modifications and point out if you think that the children are in danger, you've got to do that, right? You've always got to be there as a final barrier and buffer, to protect the children. Because I mean, I'm a father myself. I have two young children. I would do anything for them, right? And sometimes that means, eating crow and having to deal with an unjust situation and pulling through it. But I think if you have that positive approach and positive outlook, you're going to get there. America loves a comeback story. America loves, people that rise up from difficult situations. And I think most judges are going to give you that chance. Maybe not all, and that's why we also have to be careful, in using our motions to disqualify judges. If there's a couple judges, I'm not going to say in what county, that the second I see one of my clients comes up, I'm disqualifying that judge, right? Because you're going to have an issue where maybe some judges do it where they'll allow the pleadings or the petition to come into evidence, and then you just cross-examine them, right?
Right.
Which is a complete travesty of justice. They need to put on their case, and you need to be cross-examining them in live time, right? Because a lot of times they'll have the initial lie down, but they don't have the surrounding factors down. And so you need to be able to use their prior statements with their statements in court to be able to cross-examine them and do those types of things, right?
Right.
Um, so I kind of got a little off topic at the edge, but
No, you're fine.
realistically, to me, it's no matter what happens, you have to stay in the game. You can't just give up. And I know that so many dads, they just give up or they run out of money. You've got to keep pushing, because in the end, if being a father is easy, being a good father is hard, right? Is
Right.
making those difficult decisions.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you could definitely just pay your child support, see your kids on the weekends, and kind of accept it. And for some, they have to. For some, they grind and figure out how to find an attorney that'll work for them. Again, it's in Mark's book. One of the chapters is finding the right. One of the I think it's a chapter, is finding the right attorney. It's they make bad apples everywhere. You can attest, as being an attorney, you've probably seen them. I know Melissa, who's not here, has. She's said to me one time during one of our podcasts that she's a little bit disgusted sometimes that she is an attorney, but she knows that in order to make change, she has to play in the mud, and sometimes is with dirty players. What do you think? Going back a little bit, so you have all these allegations, and like we sort of discussed throughout time, without any incident, what should a judge or what would a lawyer argue? Let's say 6 months, years go by, and all those allegations that have sort of kept the child at limited access and limited communication with the mother or father, whatever the issue is. Um, at what point, can you go in for a modification, and and a lawyer should be able to argue, look, there's been no incident on my client's end. There's been a lot of accusations, but there's been no violence. There's been the father or mother is doing this, this, and this, without incident. The exchanges are fine. When do you get to argue that point to where, like, let's say a father or mother wants to have 50-50 after months and years of just muddying the water with all this nonsense?
Well, I think when we are coming back to it, remember that every issue of fact in a child custody comes back to how does it touch on the best interest of the minor child. And when we're talking about the best interest of the minor child, We're talking about their socialization, their health, their safety, their education, their welfare. And so you need to always bring it back to take it out of the interpersonal conflict and take it back into I offer this child this, just as a father, number one, but also, you're going to show your living situation, the things that you want to do for them, the activities that you want to do. Um, you know, having a full family, both sides of the family, because one of the worst things about a domestic violence is they don't just lose the father, they also lose the grandparents, their
Mhm.
cousins, their aunts, their uncles, right? This whole side of them, this whole side of what makes them, right?
Right.
They lose all these people, right? And that's a travesty, right? And so you need to show most of these judges, and I really do believe that most judges, they want to get it right regarding giving these children the best lives that they can. I
Right.
really do believe that. Some of them have maybe need to, be off the bench after they've gotten really jaded, and this is their 10,000th custody case, things like that. But I really do see a genuine regard in most family courts for the children. So you have to take it out and say, look, this is what I bring to the table for this child. One, just by being the father, but two, again, what can I do and what are my plans for these children? These children, what can I provide them? How can I enrich their lives? Right. And so to me, you want to go into, okay, this is my living situation. These are the family members that they're missing. These are the events that they're missing, right? They're missing, having all of my, if we've got a big family, all of their stepbrothers and their cousins being at their games and supporting them, being at their graduations, being at all these things.
Right.
And so I think it is very important to take the bitterness out of it, right? To not dwell on the past, other than what you have to do to refute those allegations, right? But again,
Right.
I always want my clients to be forward looking, right? What are we doing in the future to give these kids the best lives possible? Right.
Right.
So that's what I think a father should focus on if they find themselves, behind the proverbial eight ball, right?
You're right.
Go the other way. Sometimes in golf, if you're stuck in like a big pot bunker, you got to shoot backwards to get out, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um, so you just got to do whatever you can to stay in the game, right?
Absolutely. What do you think the punishment we talk about? Let's talk about in criminal cases, um, false allegations that are unfounded, or you actually find that these allegations, this person has perjured themselves. What should be the punishment in family courts? And do you find that perjury is sort of disregarded and looked at lightly in the family court? We're not throwing moms in jail for lying about any of this stuff, right?
No, and that is the sad part, is that even when you catch someone in a straight lie, I mean, half the time what you'll get is, oh, well, that was the paralegal that helped me, or that was I went to the self-help center, the domestic violence center, and I didn't even write that. I didn't even know. So you've got to stick them, and when you've got that, you've really got to put that forward, because again, you can totally refute it, and there nothing comes of this perjury. They might dismiss it, but I've never seen a judge, even when you catch someone in a bald-faced lie, right? I've never seen perjury brought. Now,
Yeah.
some of the things in California, you need to. There is code sections. They're under 3027. I think it's in section B, maybe B1, that basically false child abuse allegations can be a basis for changing custody, right? And so
Absolutely.
what I think you've got to do is, once you win the DV, you've got to follow up quickly, right? And make and move for a change of custody to sole legal and sole physical to you, and put them on monitored supervision, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so that's the other part, is being a little bit more aggressive. I know a lot of times guys will get back to an equal custody, right? But the danger's still there, because there has never been any consequence to filing that. And I've spoken with Mark about this, because we understand that we don't want a chilling effect on people bringing legitimate domestic violence restraining orders, right?
Correct.
But there has to be, and this is more on a legislative basis, there has to be some kind of teeth, whether it's a mandatory fine or a sanction or evidentiary sanctions, something like that, right? So because I've in so many cases that I've been shocked, especially since coming to Real Fathers, because I do more domestic violence cases, how often I win, right? Because if these are granted, how often I win after they've been granted. Like, it
Right.
shouldn't happen, right?
Right.
It shouldn't be happening, and we win all the time, right? And I'm not saying that we guarantee that we win, but we win a lot more than you would think that we would win,
Right.
right? And so that is an area I wish that it was a clear and convincing evidence standard, and I wish that there were some teeth in the domestic violence saying, hey, if you push forward on this, here's the consequences. And maybe that would chill the false allegations, right? Because otherwise, what are we set with? We're set with the rules of evidence. We're set with objecting to hearsay. We're out of court statements, the right to confront witnesses, right? The right to put a full record. They're going to have a text message. I need that full record of all the text messages that came before, right?
Right.
I mean, because I think it is ridiculous the fact that some of my clients have to basically have a GoPro on them at all points because they're so worried about false allegations against themselves, right? That they're constantly recording everything. And
Sure.
that must be, I have nothing but pity for people that have to live a life like that.
I thought about wearing a body cam. Yeah.
And I have legitimately have clients that have done that. I mean, I remember having a case once where I basically told my client, he was an accountant and he worked by himself. And I said, hey, if she shows up at your place, you need to get the heck out of there, right? You need to get someplace public. He did that. He ran to his car. She ran out, started banging on his car. She breaks her finger, goes to the ER, gets it. She gets a restraining order against him for 21 days. Now, did we win that later? Yes. But again, 21 days without seeing his child. And it's like, what else was the guy supposed to do?
It's
right?
another
And
hoop
it's
to
like,
jump through. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the best or the biggest things about combating false allegations is pre-planning and knowing, hey, this might come up, and what am I going to do? Right? What am I going to do when things are heated? Am I going to back away? Am I going to, try to get witnesses around? If you think it's an actual possibility and you think that they're gearing up for it, the best prevention is planning for it and
Yeah.
being ready for it, right?
Yeah.
Because by the time we get into the court of law, the deck's already stacked against you. And yeah, you can get out of it, but if you had just turned on that camera quicker, or you had refused to be caught alone with them, right? Or if you had refused to engage them in text messages and these other things, that's probably your best playbook right there, right?
Right.
Is to already have thought out the implications and what they're going to do and taken measures to prevent it.
Yeah. So Ryan, we got about 6 more minutes, and I wanted to kind of finish on one subject before we kind of transition here. As an attorney, do you think it's wise to sort of bring to a judge's attention what are some of the negative effects? And we can discuss some of them. And please give us your, as a father, I can tell you some of mine too. What are some of the negative effects that false allegations can have on a father and the kids during these high conflict disputes?
Well, gosh, I mean, if they come young enough and they're oft repeated, a parent, the opposing party can actually create a false narrative that the child believes. That's one. But
Which gets into what? Parental alienation aspect.
Correct, where we're going next.
Coercive control. Yeah, that transition, baby.
Yeah, exactly. But realistically, I mean, it runs the gamut, doesn't it? The child thinks that they did something wrong, right? Because a lot of times these kids will internalize it, right? And they will believe that if they could have done something, they could have saved mom and dad. Another dangerous one you get, and it runs into alienation, is the parentification of a child, where the children will look at, well, dad's strong and mom has these problems. Well, I'm just going to side with mom to try to protect her, right?
Right.
And a certain set of kids do that, right?
Mhm.
Um, so, but I mean, realistically, if you look at the whole gamut of what can it can have problems for these children at school. It can cause them to withdraw, right? It can cause them to not be into the same things that they used to be in before. But I think the worst thing is the loss of family, the
Right.
loss of their entirety of their family, and that big group of people that love them, the constant um, support and emotional love that these children love their parents and they just
Right.
want to be around, right? Our children are given to us perfect, and it's our job to mess them up as little as possible. And right?
Yeah.
And so when you have these false allegations, and so mother is telling them and their parents are telling them what a bad person you are, and they look at it and say, wait, but dad's only been anything but great to me, right?
Right.
And so it causes them to question themselves. Again, it's cognitive dissonance because what they know in their heart is not what they are being fed,
And
right? And I,
they don't think that mom is lying.
no, no, they don't want to, and they're not set to that, right? Most kids, again, they just want the unconditional love from both parents. And so, to me, there's no greater disservice to your children than making false allegations of abuse, of trying to limit a parent that cares. Yes, I mean, if there's terrible substance abuse issues, if there's true violence, then you know what? You need to take care of your own house and you need to get better. If you did mess up,
Absolutely.
if you went down the wrong path, then you need to clean up your aisle and then come back, right?
Mhm.
And come back stronger and a better parent, right? If
Mhm.
that really happened. But, I do believe that, these groups that are encouraging people to file false allegations to get a leg up in custody and support, I mean, it's reprehensible, right? It
Absolutely.
really is. It
And
really is.
they don't seem to care about and just to wrap it up, they don't seem to care about a man's or a father's mental health or the mental health of the children. We have kids just living on all kinds of prescription meds and depressed and anxious fathers. Let's not talk about the suicide rate of men and get into all that because we have a couple more minutes. But let's talk about not just the effects on children, but what's happening to these men. What does it do to a child when a father's financially and emotionally destroyed to the point where he wants to take his own life? He gets hooked on drugs. He's drowning himself in alcohol, and he's being reckless, not because he's a bad person, but he doesn't know the people that are supposed to help in this situation. That's the courts. That's why they exist. Are the destroyers, and they don't know who they're on their knees begging to God. And that's what I can tell you in my own experience. I've experienced, and it took a lot. So any of those of you who are going through false allegations, get help. Like Ryan said, you talked to me directly a lot about a lot of those subjects. Ryan, clean up your side of the street. If you made a mistake because of the breakup was messy, and you know emotionally abusive people can trigger emotionally weak in the moment people, and we make mistakes. Clean up your side of the road, do the things that you're supposed to do, keep fighting, keep enduring. Um, and Ryan, I'll let you have the last few words. Mark's going to pop on in a minute or two, but what do you want to tell us and while we're closing out about false allegations?
Well, I number one want to say where there's life, there's hope, right? And you can always come back. And again, even if it was wrongful, even if you didn't do what they said you did, you have to keep plugging along. Where there's life, there's hope. But also, you've got to fight at these stages. When there is false allegations, you need to bring every witness. You need to leave no stone unturned, right? You have to have a good lawyer to
Mm-hmm.
keep bad evidence out. You need to have a good lawyer to get good evidence in, but you have to show the full story, right? You have to go into it. So again, I don't like to give the other side a lot of time. I like to head straight into it. To me, the old Ernest Hemingway, if a thing is to be done, it best be done soon, right? So
Absolutely.
don't put your head in the sand. You need to address these issues as they come forward with a cool, calm, rational mind. Because number one is your kids. Your kids are the most important thing in the world. They're your greatest gift. They're your greatest future, and they're your only shot at immortality, right?
Amen.
For most of us, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, again, to me, You've got to maintain, you've got to keep on, and you've got to be better for your children. You've got to have better relationships for your children. And you've got to, even when it comes to someone on the other side who's making up these false allegations, you need to either figure out how to deal with them, or how do I take my child out of this negative situation, right? You have to have fight, and you can do it respectfully, and you can do it in the correct ways. But again, you can't just sit back and say, woe is me, and complain to everyone and say how unfair. Yes, life is unfair. Is that the common refrain that we get from life is, gosh, this isn't fair, right? But we can do so many things to be positive and have a positive outlook in the future.
Absolutely. Ryan, thank you so much. Guys, my name is Chris Cole. That's Ryan Dreyer with the Father's Rights Attorneys. Mark's going to pop on here in a minute. If you guys want to check out my podcast, We the Parents Podcast, you can check it out anywhere that you view podcasts. And we are all here today for this man right here for having us on. Thank you, Mark, so much. And guys, make sure you go on Amazon right now and get your copy for $6 or 99 cents of the Father's Rights Playbook. You don't want to miss that. And let's get Mark on the bestsellers list.
Awesome. Hey, thank you guys both for everything. That was some amazing content there. What's going on, guys? It is Mark Real Jr., the Father's Rights Attorney, and on August 7th, I am releasing my first book, The Father's Rights Playbook. My introduction to family law was my own family law case, and going through the family court system. And in doing that, my eyes were open to the injustices that occur and the trials and tribulations that fathers are put through. So it was a personal experience, and then my eyes were open to this broad systemic issue, which has inspired me to build this firm and now write this book.